When Russia was hit with heavy sanctions, it lost access to Western airplane parts almost overnight. The Western planes it had been renting were taken back or seized. The supply chain snapped. Engineers who needed parts to fix their remaining planes suddenly couldn't get them. This wasn't just annoying. Entire regions of Russia faced the real chance of being cut off from the country completely, with no reliable way to fly people in or out. So Russia did something surprising. It reached back in time, grabbed a 35-year-old Soviet plane design, tore it apart, and rebuilt it from the ground up using only Russian parts. Then it pushed that plane through one of the toughest testing programs in modern Russian history. And on June 5th, 2026, it officially passed. The plane is called the Ilyushin Il-114-300, and it's the first Russian-built turboprop of its kind to be approved in nearly 30 years. Right now, the first 3 are already being built on the assembly line. To understand why this matters, you have to know where it came from. The design goes all the way back to 1986, when the Soviet Union wanted a new regional plane to replace an aging workhorse. It first flew in 1990, a simple twin-propeller plane carrying about 50 people, built for short hops into rough places big jets couldn't reach. But then the Soviet Union collapsed, and the whole program fell apart. Money dried up, only a handful were ever built, and by the 2000s, the plane was basically dead. It came back to life in 2014, when Russia first faced Western sanctions and started getting nervous about relying on foreign planes. Engineers quietly restarted the project. They kept the basic body shape, but replaced almost everything else: a modern cockpit, new engines, new wing parts, and Russian-made electronics. By the time it flew again in 2020, it was a brand new plane wearing an old shell. Today, it seats up to 68 people, flies around 1,500 kilometers, and, most importantly, can land on short, unpaved runways. In Russia, that last part isn't a bonus. It's the entire point. But here's the part you might miss. This plane almost died, and not because of politics, because of one engine. The engine is the heart of the plane, and in 2021, it nearly ended everything. A military plane using the same engine family crashed during a test flight near Moscow, killing 3 crew members. The cause was engine failure. Instantly, the whole program was frozen. Testing stopped for over 2 years. In an industry where trust is everything, this was a devastating blow. What happened next is the impressive part. Instead of giving up, the engine makers rebuilt their entire reliability program from scratch. They pushed the engine through punishing tests it was never designed to face: freezing Arctic ice trials, full power in -40, 5-degree cold, long round-trip flights all the way to India, more than 3,000 hours across 400 test flights. And then came the number that changed everything. Let me explain why it matters. Engines are rated in something called cycles, not just hours. One cycle is one full trip. Take off, climb, cruise, come down, and land. The takeoff and landing are what really beat up an engine. A big long-haul jet might do 1 or 2 cycles a day. But a small plane hopping between tiny Siberian towns might do 6 or 7 in a single day. So cycles matter enormously for these short hop planes. In early 2024, this engine was approved for 348 cycles before needing a major overhaul. By April 2026, that jumped to 777 cycles. That's a 123% improvement in under 2 years, and they're aiming for 2,000 next. For airlines out in the middle of nowhere, where the nearest repair shop might be 1,000 miles away, an engine that needs servicing far less often is the difference between a route that works and one that's impossible. Then came the brutal testing to prove the whole plane, not just the engine. The program ran 6 long years. The plane was flown to Kazakhstan to test navigation over mountains. It flew to India. It sat outside in -40, 5-degree cold in the Russian north, after which engineers checked that everything from the anti-icing to the cabin lights still worked. It was tested in the mountains of southern Siberia. 3 planes were flying almost daily by the end. And in June 2026, it finally earned its approval, becoming the first Russian turboprop of its class certified since the Soviet era. That alone tells you how hard this was. Getting approved is one thing, but actually flying passengers is another. A leasing company signed a deal to hand the first 3 planes to Arctic Airlines, a carrier in Russia's north, which will be the first to fly it, with delivery expected by the end of 2026. Another airline in the Far East wants up to 20. A top Russian official flatly said around 20 are urgently needed in the Far East alone, just to replace the ancient planes still limping along there. His words were blunt. These aircraft are desperately needed. The government's plan calls for ramping up to dozens of planes by 2030, with early orders already placed for 65. Now, let's be honest about the serious problems, because there are big ones. First, the price. Each of the first planes costs around $45 million US. A brand new Western competitor, the ATR-72, costs about $27 million. So this plane is nearly double the price of its rival, and Russian officials have openly admitted that at that cost, the math just doesn't work for most airlines. They've ordered the industry to find ways to make it cheaper. Second, the build speed is slow. Russia plans to make only about 10 to 12 a year at peak. For comparison, the ATR maker was cranking out around 60 a year before the pandemic. Russia's factories are stretched thin between civilian and military work, so scaling up is a real question mark. Third, it only has Russian approval, no American or European certification, which means the door to most of the world market is basically shut for now. It can likely sell to friendly neighbors and maybe India, but the broad global market is closed. And fourth, Russia's other big plane projects are struggling badly. One new airliner is reportedly overweight after being rebuilt with Russian parts. Another certification still isn't finished. This little turboprop is currently the only major Russian program that actually crossed the finish line, which means it's carrying huge expectations on its shoulders. So step back and think about what this plane really is. Russia spans 11 time zones and has hundreds of towns with no roads at all. For those people, a 68-seat propeller plane isn't about competing with Boeing or Airbus. It's about survival, a link to a doctor, a supply line, a way to simply get home. The planes holding those routes together now were designed in the 1950s, and some are over 40 years old. This aircraft was built to answer one single question. Can Russia keep its own country connected without depending on nations that might cut it off at any moment? Before 2022, that was just a worry. After 2022, it became an emergency, and this plane is the answer Russia has been quietly building ever since. So here's the bottom line. The Il-114-300 isn't the fastest, the cheapest, or the most advanced plane out there. It's expensive, it builds slowly, and it can barely be sold abroad, but that misses the real story. Russia just built a complete modern airliner using 0 Western parts and pushed it to the finish line despite a deadly engine crash, a pandemic, and a wartime economy. The first airline is signed. 3 planes are being built right now. And for those 228 cut-off communities, this might just be the most important aircraft the West never bothered to notice.